everybody. It is a little bit strange to be talking to a microphone like this. We've never done this before. This could also maybe go very wrong, but so far you seem to hear me very well. I think maybe too well. Oh God. No, we're doing this also because we've had it before that people didn't hear it and then they don't say anything, and they tell us at the end, "Oh, I wish we could have heard you after 45 minutes." So maybe this is a good thing. We hope. I'm still asking, can everybody hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So English again is the language here because we are present with the presence here of two English speakers, English people. And if you have any problems understanding, don't hesitate to ask. We will go through the show. I will tell you a little bit about how we met, how this came about, and in the end you will have a chance to answer a few questions. It's extraordinary how many people are here. This must be a testament of the success of this format or the artists. I think more like the artists. But we have really grown in the audience. I don't think we have ever been so many. And it's without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Idris and Annie, who are the artists of the show, also my very close friends. And it's a great honor to have you guys here over. It's been this is special for Zurich, this is special for me. I don't know how long I had to beg you and go on your nerves for you guys to be here and to do this show with me. And I think it was sorry? Am I too loud? No? So I'm so excited that you guys are here. This is truly a dream come true, really, really special. We go way back, much longer than you might think, or I have had maybe a little bit of almost like a crush, at least on Idris's work, not on him as a person, because I didn't know him at the time. But I was fresh of uni in the art, wanting to make my mark in the art world, looked for the right place, and there was an artist I really liked his work, and that was Idris, and he was with a fantastic gallery at the time called Idris, a great gallerist, who's not a gallerist anymore.
50 years.
50 years.
Not bad.
Not bad. He opened in London with a super young team, and it was my chance to get in. I was working for nothing for about 6 months, but I really wanted to be part of this, and I got to learn to know Idris. Later on, I joined, quite a bit later on, Victoria Miro Gallery. One of my, I'm also a big fan of Victoria Miro. Many of the things I learned and still do, and the conduct in this world, in this art world, I have from Victoria, and I hold her very dear and her way very highly. Anyway, I was artist liaison there. I worked with Idris closely. We became friends. We stayed friends, I think. Annie was also around sometime, of course, quite regularly, especially when I visited them in the studios, which is always a happening. And I've also seen the progression from these musical score works, which she's still making a little bit today, some versions, variations of it. I've seen the studio space, which was maybe this size, and now 5 times the size. Annie's studio has grown next door. You guys, your practice has grown. You are so successful and have such an incredible I'm very impressionable. You have such an incredible history and projection, and I'm so proud. It's my father's phone. Thank you. Okay. Now you know why I have a microphone. That's why this ringtone is so loud. No, but it's looking back. Sometimes you have to do these things. You have to look back and assess. And I think it's just incredible to see your journey. I think it's incredible also to have seen Annie's works, these pet pieces. I still remember them. These works that you made, and we did also. Annie, you know, when I was in the studio, we always had so much fun. We brought people over. There was so much conversation, talking. We talked about everything. The studio, and then I also had a little publishing company. Most people might not know. And we did a book fair, and we showed Annie's snack sculptures. And oh yes.
Yeah.
And it was the early days of these works, and what happened now with them, how they grew in size, in popularity, where they're shown all over the world. She had an incredible Chateau Lacoste, they also made out of bronze. Anyway, we will talk all about this. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background and welcome you guys so dearly, and also especially mention how important this is to me and to have you guys here now. And I want to talk now a little bit about your work and your show, if I may. And the show is called After the Storm. And After the Storm, it is called because it is it relates. I think maybe the starting point of this show is this work over here. It's 21 works by Idris, and it comes from, the palette comes from a painting by William Turner called Thunderstorm, Avalanche, the Valley of Aosta, and then Thunderstorm. It's a very famous painting, Thunderstorm National Gallery, Avalanche, Chicago Institute. And you analyzed this, you looked at this very closely, and you dissected it, you took out, you extracted the colors of what this painting is made of, and you're looking at the colors of what this painting is made of. It's if you bring this into a contemporary context, I think it's interesting. It's like almost pixels. It's like a pixelated version maybe of this painting. That's the colors. On it, you see musical scores. They are overlaid, stamped on top of each other, hundreds, thousands of times, forming an abstraction, an abstract composition, which in its own way is so wonderful, tempting, draws you in. You want to explore it. Of Haydn's Seasons, Jahreszeiten auf Deutsch. And music plays a big part in Idris' work, repetition plays a big part in Idris' work, so does with Annie. And the colors in the show relate to that painting. So Annie was influenced maybe to a certain extent, and this is now leading me to my question, I'm so sorry. Annie made colors here, which relate to this painting, but you actually only make color works because of Annie, I think, because you're kind of known for monochromatic works, first and foremost. So that relationship I would like to explore, you guys meeting here for that, and how you guys, yes.
Can we start?
Thank you
very much.
No, I thought it was just a really good idea to sort of base a show on a painting I liked, to be honest, in the simplest form. And it was a painting that sort of jumped out at me, in a way I've always been quite obsessed with William Turner's range of colours, which was kind of moody and quite bright enough necessarily. But this particular painting I really enjoyed looking at when I was in the museum, and was coming to, I was trying to get to an idea because I have a show next year at the museum in Milwaukee Art Museum. And this is the first work that I'll be presenting of another 12 series based on old master painting. And I guess it was exactly what Fabian said, is this idea of like dissecting a painting or really looking at a painting for a long time, or even looking at reproductions of paintings, especially now that we all do lots of different social medias and the way that we look at art perhaps in terms of pixels or documentation of artworks. So I sort of looked at, okay, what can I bring in a very romantic idea to create a palette of an old master. In the show, we're looking at Veneer and we're looking at Rembrandt and Caravaggio, paintings that are sort of really appealing, and also looking at the scale of those paintings and whether I can make something that references the scale of the painting. And then that's also got to do with memory, as you mentioned. I mean, I work with a lot of memory in music and place, especially in the landscape. And I think somehow this work almost triggers a memory, or I wanted to trigger a memory of that. And as you know, I use music a lot in my work, and actually used to my late mother because she loved music, she loved to play the piano. And I remember the good times with her when she was happily at that piano. So it's almost like keeping that memory of someone alive, and I think it's, it sort of stays in what I do and what I make. And what I really love about it is the playful element of the collage. It's a paper substrate, so it's paper mounted on aluminium, and then it's watercolour and mesh. And it takes a long time to investigate which colours work as a grid, and which, when you look at it, especially what Annie does as well, is when you look at a piece, you can see it and you don't concentrate necessarily on one colour, but you concentrate on the whole work. And you're not drawn. So that's a very delicate balance, and I think it's something I've learned from Annie in the way that she creates her abstract sculptures, because that's what I like to call them, as well as paintings. You never look at one colour, you look at the whole thing as a balance, or that's a pun, sorry, as a balanced work, the way that you're not directed necessarily to strong, bright colours, if there's a sort of entirety to it. So that's what I quite like. So I thought, well, okay, let's make a show about this painting, and then the whole show becomes this entirety. This whole show you're walking into, can you walk into this world where it's based on this painting? We'll see. And then I said to Annie, hey, would you please make some sculptures based on the colours of this painting? I think she did.
No, Annie, you got to say something about that as well. Yes, I think about the color and how that what that did with you when Idris asked that, and also maybe a little bit on this, going this way as well, which I mentioned before, that you're this great colorist, and you're so driven by color, and how you managed to get Idris to basically use color.
Thank you. So Idris and I over lockdown moved out of London. We were in London and felt nervous about being there for that long with two little kids. So we found a cottage outside London. At the time, Idris, he never used colour, except he did move into blues. For 10 years he was working in monochrome, and then all of a sudden he suddenly started to use many different blues in his work over a period of a few years, I think. And meanwhile, I came to things a little differently. I studied at Beaux-Arts in Paris under Giuseppe Belloni, who's a wonderful artist. I was always really intrigued by pigment. For me, pigment was a kind of beautiful sort of, I didn't know how to kind of make it work in my work, other than I wanted to keep pigment alive in its purest form. Pigment's often used to make paint, but what I love about pigment is the kind of, when you open a lid of pigment, it's so enticing and fresh and fragile. So I used to go to the art shop near me in Paris and buy tons of pigment, the sort of cheapest quality pigment I could buy at the time. It was always the sepia colours. So I made lots of paintings, throwing sepia colours at the canvas and scratching into it, trying to kind of see how the pigment could stay as velvety and textured as possible on the surface. And then many years later, Idris and I met at my exhibition I was having in London, where I was showing those sort of peg-like works. They were somewhere between sculpture and painting. I was always interested in somewhere between. But I'm very interested in drawing, so a lot of my work starts with drawing. And Idris came to the exhibition because a friend of ours said, "Oh, you're going to marry my friend Annie." So he arrived, and 3 months later we did actually move in together, which is pretty crazy. But at the time, I hadn't got to this yet because I was making a whole different series of work, which was all about colour, but using metal lathing and clothes pegs, and they were quite free. I was obsessed with Rauschenberg and that freedom that he's so famous for, and the spirit of this kind of very, he made these wonderful collages that he was doing. Anyway, Idris mentioned his mother in these works, in music works, but we also, and I think we were going to talk about, I came to these because we lost our first child, so I had this very sort of pregnant stomach that suddenly wasn't there one day. And I remember going back into the studio, and it was a perfect time to sort of, I couldn't understand how this had happened, and it was full term, and it was such a harrowing thing to get through. And I was making these very intense drawings that were black and white, and they were all about figures and women, and I started collaging these sort of coloured egg shapes into these drawings. And those to me had this sort of hope and promise, and they started to feel very kind of joyful. So that's when I started thinking about these as possible sculptures and started to carve. The original works I made weren't as textured, but I knew I wanted to have pigment in them, and I knew I wanted the texture to be that texture I had worked on at Beaux-Arts, that pigment, the fragility of it, the freshness of it, the fact that it's so close to paint, and the fact that it sort of doesn't feel like it should stay like that made sense to me for that work. And so that's the beginning of them. And you know, they still do have a sort of, they're a memory to me of this very kind of, this tragedy that we went through, but also they're kind of joyful.
Yeah, very life assuring in a way, and we wrote about this in the press release, that kind of a totem of joy in a way. I just thought about this before, that the fact that it relates to, you know, you're stillborn, that it's almost a little bit like, because they're abstract, you know, and you are also, you make abstract gestures, you make, you have abstract, an abstract way approach to painting too. So this is somewhere in between, but this is fully abstract, but in a way it's a portrait too.
It's true.
You know, it's that portrait of obviously of that person.
In that time, and exactly.
That time.
It's trying to kind of get to keep it alive.
Yeah. And I love how, I'm just trying to put this back on 1 second. All right. I just thought, I think with your process, and both your processes have so, what I said in the beginning, I've been in this lucky position to see the progress in your work too, and how you just spoke about how much you worked on getting to this way, to this perfect way of making the sculpture, of how it perfectly communicates also what you want, and the texture and all of that. How and I think it's similar with Idris. I mean, I remember those early stamp paintings; they were fantastic, and I loved them. But you know, you continued working on this, and this element of repetition and improving. You know, to arrive at this stage at a still relatively young age. I think we are all three of us quite young still, I would say.
We're so young.
Yeah, we're so young.
We don't like to brag. How young we are.
And with Idris, it's these stamps, hundreds and thousands of times with you. It's these stacks, over and over, working on them to achieve this. And I'd like to talk about this. This process for a second too, a little bit more, because I think this is so interesting for people and to get an insight in which you rarely do. With Annie, I wrote this as well. We were, you know, Annie, you kind of almost have maybe a diary. You draw a lot. You have a sketchbook. you make drawings, you live, you have experiences, you go through life, and it's somewhere drawn out, very direct, instantaneous, subconscious maybe, sometimes conscious, or subconsciously conscious. With Idris, you write, you listen to music, you take it in, you write things down, you write poems. So there's a clear connection in your practice too, in that sense that you're recording, but you're recording it in different ways, in different outcomes. And so I find that really interesting in bringing you guys together, and in that sense. And I think it would be interesting to hear maybe a little bit more about this process.
I'm more, everybody's always talking about a Debbie Downer, but we do have 2 beautiful children now. So, in terms of that moment in our lives, that, we were blessed with 2 beautiful kids, one 11 and one 9, so that's also just move along from that with memory. The stamp paintings came out of that same brief as well, but in a very cathartic way. Instead of sort of Annie went in town, and she started to draw these really small bio drawings, I went the way where I had to almost express what I was feeling in writing. So I went writing these long passages of writing about the grief or whatever I was feeling at the time, turning those into stamps, into rubber stamps, because I don't have the natural gift of Annie. Annie has this incredible way of drawing, and her line is just instant, and she can make anything beautiful in a matter of seconds. I have to go a little bit more conceptual, and I studied photography, that's where I came from, right? So it's like overlaying pictures, overlaying photographs. I wanted the same way, or the same idea of repetition to come out into a painting. So for me, using a tool like a stamp or words or text in this way gave me the opportunity to create compositions.
So can I just say to the people who might not know the work yet, to give a bit of, to explain this. For example, if you look at this red painting there, or the painting behind you, in case you can't see it, on the periphery you see an abstract, beautifully deep red. If you go closer, you'll realize this is all made of text. It's text Idris has written, as I mentioned before, coming from his own writing, sometimes writing you picked up or influenced him, and then he stamps it, he translates it into these stamps, and then it's stamped on top of each other over a long period of time, thousands of times on top of each other. You can read the beginning, you can read the end, the core, you kind of have to imagine yourself, you have to kind of really, it's like this essence of a text that you're kind of carving out, which I really love. And in the center you have musical scores. And this is Annie, and Annie, these are these quick drawings I mentioned before, these are these sketches that are then being translated into a painting, and then Annie free-handedly stitches this over a very long period of time, making something that is very quick and instantaneous into this slow process and this epic composition of what looks like a painting, as if it was just made within a short period of time. It's very
It's actually quite nice in terms of the idea of spontaneity turning into something that you have to slow down.
Yes.
Which I suppose in some way the balance between the both works, that does work quite well because of the the idea of if you think about writing passages, writing it might not take you that long, perhaps 50 sentences, 60 sentences. But that's the starting point. I mean, Annie here, whether she uses an oil stick or pencil, whatever it is, quick, there you go, and there it is, that energy is there. The energy for me starts with the page, then it gets translated into these terms, and obviously then the process of overlaying and making that unreadable. I don't think Annie's is necessarily abstract in that sense. It's not unreadable. There's still a narrative, I think. But the narrative's gone away in mine. It's been taken away, it's been stripped away, it's been reduced to what I consider as an abstract painting.
You can still look at them for a very long time.
So therefore, in terms of what's written there and in terms of the music that's used, for me is not important. For me, what's important is the abstract mark that's left and the emotion that painting can bring. So I'm just wondering, Annie, I asked you a question about your engagement into drawing.
for me, I collect memories. You know, there's things that happened in my childhood to do with my parents, and there was quite a lot of trauma actually when I was quite young. My parents divorcing, and particular stories that kind of came out of that. There was a lot of lies, and very visual memories of certain episodes in my life that, maybe I didn't kind of deal with. I didn't do therapy, never did therapy for anything. So I ended up, doing a lot of drawing. And to me, that's a great way. I'm quite lucky to be able to sort of get out of where I, sometimes take myself out of myself and just put it all into a drawing. And what I do is I get these Constantina books, which are long and thin, the same sort of format as this piece behind me. And I have hundreds of them, and I just use them as a kind of, like a diary, so I draw them all the time, and things that come into my mind from when I was young, and that's very personal sort of moments with my parents. Kind of remember them quite strangely, because my memory is all over the place. And but I tend to sort of do abstracted versions of what I remember. And so the woman with the flower comes from, it was a portrait of my mother. And it came about when before I met Idris, I started to draw this woman who for me was so beautiful. And then, there's a moment where things with flowers are so sort of, they last just so temporary, and they're just so, there's that one moment where they're perfect.
The flower lady that's reappearing in your works.
She reappears a lot in
She
my works.
reappears
Very
in
comforting to me.
the top hat man reappears.
Yeah, the top hat man is sort of idea of perfect. And then a lot of there's other folk stories that kind of arrive into my mind that I might have read that come into these drawings. But I think what I do, what I love to do is sort of make very automatic marks, and then they kind of become a little language for me. So trees I have a lot of three-headed trees that look a bit like hands. There's certain things that I kind of return to a lot. And it's whether I might have seen them or I just enjoy the shape of them. And the flower woman is a very familiar shape to me. She is really the language of me and my mother, and so it's sort of just becomes something very automatic. I tend to put a lot of music on, and I draw with whatever I can find around me. Idris knows because he'll see it. I throw out a 9-meter piece of paper on the floor, and then I just go for it. I love to sort of just get out. I just find myself in a really different place, don't you think? And I just don't sort of hear anything. I just draw for hours, and I like it a lot. And then I take those drawings and I collage them together to sort of create compositions that then I end up sewing.
So the After the Storm is also very fitting for your work, because
Very
it is
fitting.
all this working through, it's
Yeah.
and then that is kind of the product of After the Storm.
Definitely.
And what people don't know in the room is that in Fabian and my relationship over the last 13 years is that we argue a hell of a lot. So I thought calling the show After the Storm was very fitting.
We argued today in the last seconds of replacing the whole show.
I lost that.
I wasn't even coming tonight.
I'm so glad we found a way to each other in the end still. And I'm still not dead, and they didn't kill me, which is wonderful. That's it is. But I like this about you guys also. I think it's a love-hate relationship is such an overused word, but I guess that's probably what it is. But it is a lot of battling it out. And actually, we both care about our cause, and we defend it. But we also, in the end, listen to each other. I think.
Yeah.
And then, and also, I like that, to have that relationship. You need to battle it out, because why do you get sick if you swallow it all down and never say anything. And I can do it with you guys. You can do it with me.
That's really rare.
And it's kind of quite rare in the end.
Yes.
And
Back to the art.
yeah. Anyway, back to the art. I do have obviously quite a lot of questions still, but I do also want to. I feel like I
do, and not as loud as Annie's. She has one, to be honest. More in terms of course, yeah, I tend to, but there's like, I don't know, there's a sort of natural rhythm. So sometimes I don't like it because you're sort of in a moment, right? Yeah, but
Four Seasons when you did the ballet.
yeah, exactly. I did a ballet in Zurich actually, at the Zurich Opera House in
17?
No, 15, 16, I think it's crazy. It was called Kairos, and I made it with Max Richter and William Gregor. And it was a beautiful work. And then actually from that point I got really obsessed with Four Seasons, to be honest, and especially like Max Richter's versions of it as well. And that was the first colour work, or bright colour works I made, which was just after lockdown. I made a show called The Season's Turn, which Annie was talking about earlier. And I always needed an excuse to use colour, because Annie was the one who kind of, in a way, owned the colour in the studio. Right? She was the colourist, I was always making quite monochromatic works. So I needed a good excuse to come into colour. I didn't want to just suddenly one day go, oh yeah, look at me, I'm making new colour. So to use that time that we all had in lockdown to sort of like went for long walks and looked at colours changing and looked at nature changing, we had a lot more time to reflect and look somehow. And obviously being in the countryside helped with that. So this series of paintings that I made based on the seasons changing, it's a lovely reflection on the fact that I worked with the Four Seasons before in making a ballet. So yes, I mean, it's there, it's present. But I also think about not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily matter the music that's put onto the surface of the paintings in the end. Because I think I want the viewer to reflect on perhaps, and it's quite a big thing to ask, but all sound, all movement, all rhythm, walking, listening, sounds of birds, everything you, I don't want to dictate. I mean, I know that Babby told you what the paper, the music was on sheet music, but also in the paintings as well. It's just notation. We look at notes, even if you can read notes or not read notes, you think of sound. I think maybe a memory for you of music. So that abstraction for me is then for the viewer take them to where they want to go, not necessarily where I have been.
Do you think that came out of your rhythms? This idea of using the
there was a series of works which is in the series where I basically block out where the sheet music is and then been replaced with my marks. And of course, by doing that, it gives an actual rhythm to the actual work itself, because you focus more on the negative line than you do on the stamp line. So therefore, you have these lovely abstract lines that could be maybe reference to abstract Barnett Newman and people like that. But it's quite nice that I go into the music. I like going to music shops and looking through different sheet music to see the blocks and how they change and the way the lines change between the bars, because it gives us a natural sort of rhythm to it.
I thought about this just today, that you are bringing quite ingeniously, obviously, three genres together in the art making: the writing, the music, and fine art making, fine making. And I think that's all these years with your work, I never thought about that.
I quite like that. I mean, in terms of like moving, both compositions are in the space right now, which is just one where I leave the line in the middle, which is almost like a kind of horizon line, and then more into the different compositions now, where I have this window in the centre of the painting, which I think is quite nice because I mean, you can think of Joseph Alvarez perhaps in the way that he used the window in the square in the centre of the painting, but for me it's kind of like a window into into a landscape or into a sort of memory or rhythm of some sort, perhaps. And then this line at the bottom, which is always like a horizon line that sort of cuts, and you have the right hands. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Well, a traumatic experience is necessary to create interest in art.
I think it's a great question. And I think that actually, yes. I think for me, when you're all happy and things are going great, it's a lot harder. To quickly think back on when things weren't so good. Because it's important, but also there's a lot that one has that is hard. And as we lose people, and there's a lot of grief, and so there's a lot that as you go through life, there are things that do come up that. So it's always feeding into my work.
I also think there's not such personal struggles either, right? I mean, it's global struggles, it's politics. Necessarily doesn't have to have it happen to you directly. Other shows in the past that I've made have been very much about political situations. I made a show, Victoria Row, which Fabian helped curate, which is based on the Syrian war, for example, and people's personal stories that come from that. So yeah, I think there's something that we've been about using, especially for me, when I'm painting, I'm really using other people's work too, not just my own. And some maybe, if they can the paintings hold that emotion.
Actually, the Messiaen piece that you did, which fell into the sculpture downstairs, the bronze of yours, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I mean, on a sort of technical level, I made sculptures with sandblasting. So I rusted steel for a long time, and then I used different templates, and I used sandblasting to create the layers of the music on the surface. This is a piece called Quartet for the End of Time, which is based on an Olivier Messiaen score, which he made in a concentration camp in 1942. And I suppose that story of a composer being in a camp like that, he created the music itself through the bird songs that he was hearing on the outside, and then obviously made it. I imagined him scratching the surface of the cell wall with the music somehow, because obviously not having papers and tools to write. And so I kind of loved the way that the music was almost, felt like it was embedded into a surface. So the sculpture downstairs is a nice progression onto what is able to be made now, because I've never been able to have that amount of layers within a surface. So obviously with technology and three-dimensional printing, I was able to take each piece of sheet music and create 0.05 of a mil per layer. So when you go downstairs and you look at the sculpture, it's made up of the layers of the musical notation, but it's fixed, or it feels like it's been embedded into the surface and almost held there. It's actually, contradicting myself a little bit, because the music in the surface is Mozart's Requiem, which also is a very huge piece of music in my life, but it was the last piece of music he made before he passed away. But it's almost like if I imagine, I don't know, the end of the world and the sculpture's left, when someone finds it again, what do they see in some way? What is it that all these notes mixed together, held there in the surface? What does it mean? Can it reference sound? So anyway, abstract thoughts.
No, I think it's so interesting how you, with this way, you kind of plan the picture or the effort one wants to make to create the image in your head, in your thought. And I think that brings it back, so as you said, you want to hear the music maybe when you listen to it. You are, but there is we mentioned this before, this dissection of something, bringing it down to something maybe which visually looks more simpler, but it actually opens up to depth in yourself, in your own. So you actually might reflect much more on the musical score by Mozart's Requiem by looking at your work than maybe just listening to it, or at least it gives it another sort of depth to it, which I find really, really interesting. And that brings it back to the After the Storm work, because we asked this in the press release. Does it maybe trigger the memory of the actual work? And what does it, looking at this work, do to you when you look at the great master's piece itself? And I think that's really
It's a good start.
It's a good start. We are slowly also, if there are any more questions.
There was a question, sorry.
Sorry, yes?
Yes, hi. My question would be to Amy. So I realized you also have 1, 2, 3 there, if I'm correct. And I assume your working is quite spontaneous, but also like the sculptures, they add up of certain amounts or numbers of these balls or spheres, right? So do you have a connection to the numbers in your work in that sense also, or is that also?
I used to use numbers a lot when I was drawing figures. It's something that kind of would always put numbers in as a kind of way of using. Somehow the numbers became abstracted, but I like the idea that people are made up of numbers. Something to do with numbers really interested me, and I actually think that's a really good perception, because I think, you know, that I think they were just very automatic for me. I just sort of start to draw things, and, you know, I often put pretty much most of my drawings have numbers in them, and I think it's just about moves. And the sculptures I catalogue, but with the number of spheres in each one, and then I use the colour of the top of them. So this one is stack 8, and it's cobalt turquoise. So I've always sort of, I like to use numbers a lot in my work. And like, it's something about time, I guess, and moving through time.
Thank you.
Wait,
What's another one? Okay.
Yeah, I guess kind of following up on that question, I wanted to know a bit more, Annie, about how you make your work in terms of, are these spheres kind of just lying around in your studio and you're like, okay,
Yeah, that's
like, but these and this color, so yeah.
So that's a really good question. I think so. My studio is well, both Idris and I share these studios separate but together in a way. They're all toy factories, and they're really big, and they've got these huge 6.5 meter ceilings. And when I got the studio, I felt like this is great, because I you know, you're dictated by the size of your studio, really. So in the beginning, I wasn't able to make these really ambitious big works that I'm now making. The way I have a sort of dirty studio nearby on the same street, and I go in, so I carve these spheres, the shapes, and then I put them together, and then often I'll do like a little watercolor of what colors I'm going to be using. I mix a lot of the paints in the studio. There's a lot of trial and error with the textures. I know now I'm like so kind of versed at what pigments, how they react to different layers of sand. I use lots of different grains of sand. So if I'm using that chrome oxide, that iron oxide orange, that's a very kind of, it picks up a lot of texture from this harder grain sand. So I mix that with plaster as well, because I love the sort of lumps of plaster within the sand, because for me it kind of makes it feel more close to the kind of pigment itself. And I often, Idris mentioned before, when you see the sculptures, you don't really kind of hone in on one particular colour, it's sort of your eye moves through them. The ultramarine blue, that is such a kind of strong, intense colour that everyone kind of knows, it's such an incredible colour, but it's a difficult colour to use because you can almost stop a flow of the work. So I kind of play with that a lot, of how to use that. But it is an extraordinary colour, your eye kind of moves around it in a certain way, it's so beautiful. And often I'll keep moving. I mean, I work on a number of sculptures at the same time, because I kind of keep moving and changing them. I love things that are changeable. I love to be able to move things around. I don't like commitment. So I've never liked it. So I like the idea of change. So often I'll almost be ready for it. In fact, I was quite late with the shipments. I changed something.
Yeah.
There was a lot of change. Yeah, I like, you know, there's 3 different turquoises that I work with, and I was unsure about which turquoise I was going to. And then, you know, I've been making these for 6 months or so.
It's true. It's true. It's like right to the last leaving. It's quite unbelievable.
Everyone gets it.
Quite unbelievable. To the frustration of the studio team, and also I'm surprised.
After the storm. After the storm.
Actually, a lot of people around us had that. I was like, you never commit Idris. So there was that. Yes, it's definitely in the work as well. Yeah, the constant change.
Okay, I think we slowly have to wrap it up.
On that note,
no, sorry. Idris and Annie are here for the rest of the evening. We have, we can drink together and eat something. I also just wanted to maybe, as a last note, or second to last note, also make aware of, you did it already, of your fantastic museum show coming up next year at the Milwaukee Museum of Art, but also Annie's first foundational institutional show Fosun next year in China, Shanghai. So that's a pretty big thing. And so even more how difficult it was to get these busy guys here and to be with us is really fantastic. And it's only the second time they actually showed together in a way. So also that is quite special. And last, I wanted to say that Idris and Annie made wonderful posters for this show, which we sell for 20 Swiss francs over there. They would like to sign them also for you guys if you want that.
They're cheaper when they're signed.
And Annie's poster, the printer, we kicked them in the butt, but it was just impossible because it's so specially made. They only arrive on Monday, but you can sign up or to get it. And Idris has made it through the printer, so this is he was lucky. That's why this one is here. But both of them, yes, and so they're happy to sign up. Thank you very much. Thank you.